This afternoon I want to talk about humility in life and in leadership. Thinking back when I was a kid, my dad really liked the basketball player Bill Russell. Bill Russell was known as a great sports athlete as well as a great sports leader. And one of the things about Russell is he was always a winner, and people looked up to him and what he did. And he won 11 NBA championships. He was a 12-time NBA All-Star. He won an Olympic gold medal, and he was also a winner of the Presidential Medal of Honor. And he was asked one time by a sports reporter what makes a good leader, and he says, you have to be a servant. You can't be a good leader without being a good servant. And then he went on to say, two important things about leadership are humility and self-respect. And you can't be a good leader without two of those things. Now, our world today is full of people who have no self-respect whatsoever. And there's also people that put themselves way above everyone else at different times. And the Holy Bible is full of teachings regarding humility and being a good servant. We're going to talk about some of those things today. If you look at John 12:26, and it says, if anyone serves me, he must follow me. And where I am, there will always be my servant. Also, if anyone serves me, God will honor him. And then 1 Corinthians 6:20 has a statement in there that says, you were bought with a price. And the reason why I wanted to say that early on is because we're going to get to that a little bit later, but I want you to be thinking about that as I go through with this presentation. Now, when I was a young kid, I was about 8 years old, and I came in one day. My mom handed me the book of etiquette, and I had no idea what this thing was. And she told me I had to read that book. Well, throughout that book, I found examples of humility. Also, as a young kid, I read the Bible quite a bit, went to church, and throughout those teachings were a lot of teachings regarding humility. I went into law enforcement later in life when I turned 21, and I encountered a lot of people that had a great deal of ego and had a lack of self-respect and did not respect others along the way. And when I became a police supervisor years down the road, a lot of the young officers that worked for me had a very big ego, and they were very selfish, and they thought only of themselves. They had a lot of selfish ambitions. But in working with these folks and dealing with these folks on a daily basis, I learned a lot of valuable lessons. And I learned that humility, self-respect, and being a good servant are all traits that are valuable in our life. Now, going back to Bill Russell, I want to touch on him again for just a few minutes. I remember seeing an interview with him many years ago where he was in front of a group of Boy Scouts in Seattle, Washington. And one of the Boy Scouts asked him, they said, Mr. Russell, what makes a good leader? And Mr. Russell sat there for just a second, and he said, son, to be a good leader, you have to be a servant. Well, the book of Matthew 23, verse 11 through 12, talks about the greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts him will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Our life is not about material things, and a lot of people out here in this world think that our life is about material things. You know, it's about growth and development, doing things for others, growing in those relationships, and helping people to grow as a part of those relationships. I was reading a book that came from the Christian bookstore here recently, and it was by authors Larry Bodie and Ram Sharon. And they said, the more you contain your ego, the more realistic you are about your problems, and you can learn from anybody at any time. And I thought that was a valuable statement that they had. And it went on to talk about how listening is one of those key aspects of humility, and how being a good listener helps you to grow and develop along the way. Well, the thing is, when you do these things, it becomes a habit, it becomes second nature for you, and it's catching to other people. Now, if you think about our society, servant leadership is rare. It's a valuable trait. People look up to folks who are servant leaders. And if you go to the book of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 6:20, it says, Jesus paid a price with his blood so the bodies and souls of believers will have eternal life. There's no greater example of servant leadership than that. You know, back and forth between the Bible and Bill Russell, because that's a part of our lives. You know, the Bible was written many years ago, but we have people today that are good examples of this. And Bill Russell, in his book Russell Rules, talks about how he tried his best to help his teammates develop and grow. And he said, when he was asked about egos at one point, he said, if energy is misdirected, success will be impossible. Well, there's many in our society now, many leaders in our society that have misdirected egos. You know, God tells us all that we should sacrifice for others and serve others, and it helps us to grow. Most people only look at themselves, but God looks at our hearts, so that's why it's important to do all these things. You know, Romans 12, verse 3 tells us to be cautious about thinking highly of ourselves. Well, the thing I want to tell you today is humility requires us to be honest with ourselves, and that's a big thing. In a leadership class at one time, I was reading a book, Good to Great, by Jim Collins, and he talked about how humility is manifested in self-awareness, open feedback, and low self-focus. There was an emphasis on reaching out to others. In the Leadership Challenge, it was a book I also had to read by Coos and Posner. They talked about how humility is the only way to solve conflicts and contradictions in leadership. All these lessons tell us to grow, we got to be humble. And what I would like for you to think about is practicing these things. And 1 Timothy 4:15 says, practice what we've talked about and you too will grow and develop. Thank you.